Hello and welcome to another episode of Wednesdays with WE. This is episode number 28, and the guest on this episode is one who is no stranger to India, but she is one who's played for Australia and she's led Australia as well. And of course, after retiring from cricket, she is been entertaining everybody behind the mic as a broadcaster. She is none other than Lisa Sthalekar, who's popularly known as Sheikha amongst her teammates and her friends in Australia. And currently, she happens to be the mentor of the UP Warriorz side in the WPL. It's my pleasure to present you Lisa Sthalekar. Of course, she's no stranger to India. Lisa, thanks for joining in and happy Women's Day.
Thank you. That's very, we've spent a few Women's Days together actually over the years, haven't we?
We have in the last couple of years. Anyway, getting into it right away, the WPL is started. What does this mean to women's cricket?
I think it's huge for the game, and also huge for women's cricket in India. There have been a number of us that have been calling for it for a number of years, and to actually see it happen and be here for the inaugural event and to be part of the auction and, see people's lives change, but also people's perception of the game and its commercial capacity. WPL will have a huge footprint that it will leave behind in the women's game. And you just feel like this will be the game changer to take it to another level. I mean, we've already seen, and you've been watching a lot of women's cricket over the years now. I feel like there's been a real shift even in this tournament with players going even harder. I mean, it does help that the pitches and the boundary size and the outfield being quick helps, but, the scores have been really good. Players have been taking more risks and it's been paying off, and it's entertaining cricket.
Talk us through the excitement levels with the girls in the UP Warriorz side.
Yeah, so coming in for the UP Warriorz, there's girls that I've never met before. I've seen bits and pieces of domestic cricket, and then obviously we've got a few girls from the under-19 side that was successful in South Africa beginning of the year. When we all first met, huge smiles. Everyone's excited. It's like Christmas where you unwrap and you get new training kits, and you're like, oh, I like this shirt and I like this color, and and just running out as well for the first game. You could see, girls were taking it in. Some were a little bit overawed by the occasion, but you'd expect that, given that this is a huge step up. But everyone's excited. Even though we lost yesterday, there were some wonderful learnings, but everyone's still got smiles on their faces because you can't. It's kind of a pinch yourself moment that you're part of the first WPL and they're there as players and they can be having an impact.
I can understand the Indian girls being really excited, but I hear that the girls from abroad are far more excited than the Indians.
Yeah, I think because they realize what this will do for the game globally, and being an Australian and spending a lot of time with the Australian women's side, they're very conscious of the fact that, whilst they liked winning trophies, they want to see the global game grow, and they feel that this will be the answer to it. So, they're coming in, they're interacting with Indians for the first time. Like, I know a few of them have had and played with a couple of Indian players, whether it be in WBBL or the 100, but it's totally a different experience coming in and being part of a squad that's predominantly Indian. We've got some girls that, don't speak a lot of English. So it's just understanding how to communicate out on the field, at training, running between wickets, but then also embracing what Indian culture is. When a touring side comes, they get little snippets, but at the end of the day, they're in their little pack of what they normally do, and they go to certain cafes and eat certain foods, whereas here, everything is blended together. So they've just got to kind of soak it up a little bit more. And I think this will be really important for them in their personal growth and personal development in understanding India and the culture.
a few games have been played. I think the teams have settled in a way. Are you happy with the way things have panned out, or short of expectations?
For UP Warriors?
Generally.
Yeah. Look, I think, when the auction process took place and you looked at everyone's squad, you're like, oh, yeah, they've got some good players. Oh, yeah, they've got this and this. But it's all about trying to fit in your internationals and get the balance right with the Indian domestic players. So I've been fascinated to see how each side has tackled that. There seems to be two standouts at the moment, Mumbai Indians and Delhi Capitals. So it'll be interesting to see as the tournament progresses, whether the pitches change as well. That will definitely change, balance of sides. It certainly hasn't disappointed the WPL. A role that's kind of been involved in women's cricket before, really. Obviously, in the men's game, it has. I guess each mentor, if you look at the mentors for each side, they bring something different. Their own set of skills, whether it be obviously with cricket or tennis for RCB. But maybe the difference that potentially I can bring is having spent a lot of time in India, feeling very comfortable in this place and almost it being my home as well, potentially making it an easier transition for the overseas players to fit in and to understand certain things and why things are done a certain way. But then on the flip side, I also think part of my role will be to educate and help navigate the Indian players into potentially a very Western way of thinking about tackling the game of cricket, but also in terms of even food as well. So, so I'd love to be able to expose them to a few more Western cuisines or, a latte or a cappuccino instead of the South Indian coffee, so that when they tour potentially with the Indian side abroad, it won't be too daunting for them as well. So I think it's a mixture of both. I've certainly enjoyed it. I mean, I miss being in the commentary box with you guys. So when I rocked up for the first game, it was kind of weird. I was waving to the cameramen who we worked with in South Africa, and I've worked, for over 6 years with some of those guys, and then running around to the presenters. Sanjana was there, gave her a cuddle, and Stacey did the toss. She'd interviewed the second captain, and she was really nervous. So I was talking to her about that yesterday, and so, whilst I miss it, it's been lovely to be back involved in a team environment because for me, I haven't been part of a team since 2016, and the game's changed a lot. I mean, you've got literally digital cameras in your face the whole time, capturing everything. How support staff start to work together, and obviously a franchise tournament is completely different to a national setup where you can work with players over a longer period, whereas here there's not a lot of time to fix techniques, so to speak. So I've loved every minute.
Even as you're beginning to understand the role of a mentor, do you think you could have done with a mentor during your playing days?
I mean, I could have done with a spin bowling coach as well. I never had one until right at the end of, I think, my last tour. I had John Davidson, who came as part of the coaching staff, and it was just amazing having someone with that specific skill base that was able to help me. So having a mentor, I mean, to be honest, in my career, I probably had people that I would go and talk to about my game. And I think certainly players still have that. There's still people that they trust, or, whether it be their coach back home, or a former player that they've had a connection with, or, the people do have mentors. But to have one traveling around and available and accessible at any time, I think is really important, because they see you in a training environment, they see you out in a game, they see how you cope with things, and then they can help and assist when required. I know Belinda Clark was with the Australian team for the first week of the World Cup in South Africa. And it's the first time that a past player has come back into that Australian setup. And you look at how successful the Australian team was, but you speak to the players and they loved having her around. So I think moving forward, we see it in the men's game a lot. But I'd love to see in the women's game, those mentors, whether it be in, former players or even someone outside of the cricket fraternity, being that person that players can go to and confide. And as you know, a group of females touring for a long period of time, we're females, there's going to be things that crop up, and sometimes you just need to vent, get things off your chest, and then you can move on. So I think that's something that a mentor can also do.
The Aussie way of cricket, how difficult is it for the other nations to match it?
Well, you look at the Indian side, and they've been the side that has pushed this Australian side, and there have been a number of times that they should have won as well. I do think the WPL will help just bridge that gap. I don't think it's as big a gap as people perceive it, but there is a mentality, and they've got a core group of players that really believe that they can win from any situation. And you can't build that, you can't create that. That happens over a long period of time, and that's where the Australian team is. There'll be retirements at some stage, you would imagine, and they'll go through a different phase, this Australian side. But I don't think teams are that far away. England and India are certainly pushing them. But the Australian mentality has been built over such a long period of time. And so these domestic tournaments and the infrastructure underneath your national side is really important. Exposing players to hardened cricket time and time again is going to be beneficial. I mean, you took and you brought in an India A series for that next generation. That's really crucial. I mean, one player that stands out who went on that tour with you is Renika Singh Thakur, and now she's having a huge impact on the Indian side. But she played India A, where there's not as much stress or scrutiny, and she can work on her game in different conditions. I think those type of programs are going to be really crucial. And obviously, we've seen now the first under-19 tournament. We've seen an underage national tournament here in India. So everything's ticking along nicely to ensure that you've got a bigger pool, but also that you're playing hard cricket regularly, which will challenge the Australian side moving forward.
The Cricketers Association in Australia is active and strong, and it has its own standing. What kind of a role has it played in the Australian team's success?
I think it's played a huge role in the sense that as women's cricket has come from an amateur to a professional sport, it's ensured that the access to good facilities, good coaching, first and foremost has been really important. And even, one of the first things that happened when the female players were part of the Players Association, we had to have the best health care cover. And that we were forking that out of our own pocket. So in the end, it was costing a lot of players to play for their state. But even just the Players Association soaking that up, allowed players to make sure that they had the best health cover. So if there was an injury, everything's taken care of. But then we've seen remuneration increase. And as the game has grown, and the revenue has grown, then there's been a certain pie allocated to the women's game. And that has allowed them to focus on cricket a lot more instead of working a full-time job and trying to fit cricket around. It's also the support. So, people think players associations are a union and it's all about money. It's actually, it's a support network for the playing group. So that they can concentrate and focus on what they're doing. But also it's to ensure that the players, when they decide to leave the game, whether it's their decision or it's not, there is a process and a plan to be able to transition them to whatever their next career is. And that's really tricky for athletes. And you would know, being in this Indian setup and domestic players, and how many people fall off and they disappear, and things they don't land on on both feet. So, Players Association assists players through that. And then also through COVID, we've seen a lot of players deal with mental health issues, being stuck in bio bubbles. The Players Association has really ensured that they've got the right people involved, but also programs in place and any kind of counselling or anything available to players at any time of the day. So that's the most important thing I think that the Players Association does is they look after the players to make sure they're good. They work in tandem with the national board and Cricket Australia. And at the end of the day, both the national body, as in Cricket Australia, and the Players Association, we want the best for the players and we want to grow the game. So working together has certainly been fruitful for everyone.
As the president of the International Cricketers Association, what are you focusing on?
So I've been involved with FICA now since 2016 as a board member, and then middle of last year, was elevated to the president's role. I guess for me, what I'm focusing on is, and want the organisation to focus on, is ensuring firstly that all Players Association have the infrastructure and the personnel to bring on women's cricket as well, not just focus on the men's game. So even new associations that are being formed is to ensure that it's not just the male players that are members, it's the female players as well. And then, one thing that I know and everyone knows is that, there's so much great things happening in India from, a commercial point of view, from the technology point of view. And whilst there's no Indian Players Association for current players here in India, that's not for us to decide or judge or anything. That's the Indian players. But we need to have an understanding of this landscape because all of our players, FICA players, come here and play, whether it be international tours or now the WPL or the IPL. So, we're certainly spending a lot more time here in India and understanding how things work here. What can we learn as an organisation to take back and put into our players' associations and work with players so that when they come to this country, it's an enjoyable experience. They understand the cultural differences and that they can get the best out of themselves as a cricketer, both on and off the field.
Would you like to see more of Test cricket played in the women's vertical?
I would, but not at the expense of probably the fastest growing format, which is T20 cricket. I think there are certain countries that have the depth, have the infrastructure and the money as well to put on Test cricket. And I'm all for them having the opportunity to play. As players are speaking to the players, they want to play Test cricket. You want to see how you go in the hardest format of the game. There's no place to hide in Test cricket. You get found out pretty quickly. So the players certainly want to do it. The players also understand the cost of what that is and what that would be like if you play a Test and not 3 T20s. So they understand that. So there are certain countries that, obviously England, India, Australia, South Africa. I know the Australian team are playing a Test against South Africa in January next year. So, and New Zealand, I'd love to see them play Test cricket, but I believe the board aren't in favour of that and they want to focus on the shortened format. And each national board will have their own reasons why they want to do that. But, I think as the game keeps growing and developing and as their playing group starts to become more professionalised and they start challenging, I think it'd be great to see more Test cricket. And I think the multi-format series is the perfect way to bring it in. I think that the 3 ODIs, 3 T20s and the Tests and points being allocated make sure that, everything counts towards, an end trophy. So, yeah, more Test cricket, but in time when the playing group and the infrastructure's in place.
Are you happy with the current version of the female FTP?
Well, it's the first time we've had it, Raman, isn't it? So, so that's a big step in itself. It certainly allows national boards to start to plan and organise. Like, for example, the Ashes happening at the same time. So now when they're selling the tickets for the Ashes, it's not just the men's Ashes, it's the women's Ashes as well. It's all of a sudden created a big event. So I can't wait to see that unfold in June, July over in the UK. but it also allows broadcasters to plan and organise and start to really promote the women's game. So I think the women's schedule is actually in a really healthy position. I think organically there's been carved out windows for the 3 big domestic tournaments, but given the success of SA20 and things like that, and obviously South Africa making the final, we may see that pop up. Obviously CPL is starting. There's exhibition matches taking place in Pakistan. So we need to learn from the men's schedule and not crowd it too much. We need to create simple windows. And I think we're in a healthy place at the moment. But the one area that cricket can grow is women's cricket. So I think we'll all have to keep a close eye on it and work together. That's the thing. Work together to make sure that we're not extending our players too much, that they're having to make too many choices about different things. We want them to be able to play bilateral cricket, ICC events, and also the franchise cricket as well.
How much has your cricketing career helped you in terms of administration and now in your new role as mentor?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was part of the generation that, you had to work. And I was fortunate enough to kind of fall into Cricket New South Wales and was there firstly started as a development officer, going out to schools and running little clinics for kindergartens up to year 12 students, really. So, and then went into the high performance area as well. So got a chance to work with Elise Perry and Elisa Healy when they're about 13, 14 years of age. So that experience certainly has helped, but then also playing different tournaments and being around the game, being on board. So I was on the ACA board from 2010 and understanding, what the male players get and how that structure works. All of that seems to kind of gel nicely. And now being a broadcaster, I understand a little bit more, not completely, but especially in Australia, timings of matches and why is it on a certain channel and not this channel, and how do you promote it, through your news and all sorts of things. So all of that has certainly enabled me, hopefully, to be able to give back to the game from a number of different aspects. But whilst my roles are quite varied, they're all involved in cricket, and I think they complement each other really nicely. So. I whilst it's full on sometimes, I certainly enjoy what I do at the moment.
You had your stint as a captain. How would you rate that stint of yours?
My stint as the captain? Yeah, it's an interesting one. I obviously was vice captain of the Australian side for a number of years, got an opportunity to captain a couple of games, but my majority of my captaincy was at the state side. And I look back at it and, there are things that you'd love to change. But one thing I was really happy about during my role was, I remember coming into the New South Wales team and the Australian team, and as a young player, you just kept your mouth shut, sat in the corner, did what you were told, and off you went, right? There was that kind of hierarchy. And I know that certainly has been the case within the Indian side. I don't know if that's still the case. Whereas, when I look back at my time, it was when Elise Perry and Elisa Healy came into the New South Wales side as 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. And I'd like to think that I made them feel very comfortable and were part of the group straight away. There was no hierarchy. They gave me a lot of banter. They didn't have any issue telling me off. I'm thinking, who are these young punks telling me what to do? But we ended up, actually, the three of us, becoming really good friends. And at the back end of my Australian career, it was those two that I got a lot of enjoyment out of, and I love seeing them, what they're doing now as well. But yeah, I think being open and being very inclusive certainly was part of what I did. But, on the flip side, the actual cricket part, I love the tactical side of things. That's something that I always enjoyed. And, you'll probably see me in the commentary box talking about tactics. Why they got this field? Why are they doing this? We have wonderful discussions. outside of the mic in the green room, discussing everything. But there were things that I was really happy with what I was able to achieve, and there were probably things looking back, you'd always like to improve on. But yeah.
As a captain, where does Meg Lanning figure in your list? Not just in Australian cricket, but in international cricket.
Yeah, I mean, here's a player that never captained any of her underage side or state side. She was thrown in as, a 24-year-old to captain the Australian team. I've seen a huge development in her as a leader. Initially it was follow me, follow what I do. And then in 2017, she had that shoulder injury, had surgery, missed the Ashes. And it was the first time that she'd been left out. And she all of a sudden started to go, oh, now I know what it feels like to be on the sideline, one of the benchies, or, not part of the group. And then coming back in, where do I fit? Where do I sit? All of that. And those type of experiences made her more empathetic to the bigger group. It's very hard when you've always been really successful and always been selected and always done well. When things aren't going well, how do you cope? And then even her taking the time out of the game for as long as she did, is a brave call to take a step back, because you can just literally get on this roller coaster and train, and you just don't get off now with the amount of cricket that's being played. So for her to take that time off was brave. And I think even in this WPL competition, she's probably been the standout as a skipper, very assured of what she's doing, has a good grip of the Indian players. I mean, she'll learn as she goes. I think all of the captains, even Smitty and Harman, who don't play a lot of domestic cricket, are trying to figure out what all the Indian domestic players, what can they do under pressure. But yeah, she's a standout skipper, and her record speaks for herself. I mean, she's lucky and very fortunate that she's got a wonderful group of players. She had a wonderful vice captain in Rachel Haynes. I thought they complemented each other really well, and I think she learnt a lot off Rachel, and that will hold her in good stead. But she'll go down as one of our greatest captains.
What does it take for a side to overcome difficult situations on a regular basis? A good captain?
Yeah, a good, calm captain out on the field. So when there's helter-skelter and everyone's running around, and you want your captain, and I liken it to a duck sitting on a pond. The feet may be going crazy underwater, but you've got to have you've got to show that you're in control at all times. And I got to see that by one of the best in the world. I think Belinda Clark was an excellent captain. And there were a number of times we shouldn't have won games of cricket, but she came in and goes, hey, I need you to bowl the last over. And if a younger player kind of balked at it, she goes, well, I'll do it then. I mean, she wasn't a bowler really, but she kind of gave the belief to the player. So, yeah, I think certainly a captain out on the field, but you also need a support staff that believe in you, that don't doubt your skills, that don't that make you feel like if you fail, it's okay, because you're actually going to learn a lot from that. So, as long as there's trust that you've prepared accordingly and you've done the work you need, and you go out and play with freedom, I think that support is really important. And then you start to go even further out, your family and your mentors and people around you. I think, it is really an ecosystem. If you want a successful team, it takes all parts. There can't really be a weak link in there. And at the moment, the Australian side is probably showing that they can do that and do it regularly and successfully.
If you were to grade talent, tactical acumen, attitude, and temperament, how will it stack up?
Sorry, what were all of them?
If you were to grade in one particular order, talent, tactical acumen, attitude, and temperament, how will it stack up?
Well, I think firstly you have to be talented enough to be in the side, to hold your place. And we're talking about captaincy, right? Or just
generally for a player.
Generally, yeah. So I think from a talent perspective, you need to be head and above shoulders of anyone else to keep your spot. But then But then when you start to look at international cricket, and we look at, Indian players, English players, Australian players, the difference between a good player and an absolute star is their temperament, is their attitude, is their tactical nous. So then that stands out, because everyone can play a wonderful cover drive, right? Like Laura Wolfhart has the best cover drive in the world, but can she consistently deliver like a Meg Lanning? So what's the difference? And I think it's the temperament, attitude, and tactical nous. So I believe at an international level, it's what goes on between here is the difference. And if you can keep your mind calm, clear, and make good decisions, then you will succeed more often than not. But if there's scrambled eggs going on up there, you may have the best looking cover drive or the best pull shot or the best Yorker. You're just not going to be able to execute it regularly. So whilst players and sometimes support staff focus on the skills that you can measure, you can't measure mental strength. There's no form. There's no score out of 10. There's no numbers that get spit out. But yet that's the most important thing, I think, in international cricket.
This next question is going to tickle you. Is it time for the boundaries to be made bigger in women's cricket?
Please. I've been asking this for years. And I actually think as well, you could potentially go 5 out as well. Enough with this 4 out. I understand the reasons why it was put in place. Get it. Absolutely get it. Understand. And there has been a huge development in the women's game in terms of power as well. But also the surface, the pitch makes a huge difference. If you're going to give low, slow turning tracks to female cricketers or any cricketers, it's going to be hard going, right? But if there's pace and bounce, then it doesn't matter. You can extend the boundaries. I think people like an even battle between bat and ball. And I think we wanted to get the scores a certain level. And so the average punter all of a sudden sees, 140, 160, 180, 200 now we're seeing in the WPL. They want to see those type of scores. They don't want to see a 120. So we're getting that. But I think if you extend the boundaries, then we start to see, and I think we saw it in the T20 World Cup. There was 2s, there was 3s. So that physical aspect and that tactical aspect of, hitting to the longer side or things like that, that's entertaining. That's interesting as well. So the answer is a simple yes, as soon as possible.
If reason, what will that be according to you?
Sorry, if there is
one reason to take up sport for any young kid, what will that be according to you?
Well, I'll go one step further. The reason to take up team sport is because it teaches you so much in life that you can take forward in your work life, in your home life, and it's communication, working together for one vision, being respectful. You don't need to be best friends with everyone, but you need to learn to respect people and what they do. Sport gives you so much. And then on the flip side, that's just skills that you learn from playing sport. But then I look at it in more of a holistic point of view. And I've got friends in the corner of all the globes. And it's a genuine family. Like, there are experiences that you go through with your teammates and even opposition players as well, that you have a unique connection, something that you will never have with other people. And that's really special. And whilst trophies and awards and ICC titles are amazing, what you actually remember, and I'm sure you'd feel the same as well about your career, is those funny experiences that you have on tour, those silly things that you got up when you were a teammate or when someone did something silly, or those are the memories that really stick. games kind of all blend into one. And yeah, you might have a trophy at the end of it, but it's actually the experiences and the journey that you go through and the memories you create. That's really special. So whilst it's good physically to run around and exercise and do all of that, I think there is something so special about team sport.
Finally, on Women's Day, a word of advice for all the aspiring and cricketers.
Love what you do, enjoy it. It is a roller coaster ride, and certainly one thing that I've seen about this next generation coming through, you guys want success straight away, and you'll get it. But when you come to each next level, soak up the experience. You're not going to be the best cricketer at age 11, 12, 13, 19, 21, 23. You've still got a long way to go. The late 20s, early 30s is when you start to figure out this crazy game of ours. But enjoy the ride. It's worth every sacrifice that you make, trust me.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. As always, been delightful chatting to you. And once again, thank you very much for accepting at such a short notice.
Anytime for you, Raman.
Thank you. There it was, Lisa Sthalekar, being as articulate as always and giving us a lot of food for thought. Fantastic conversation it was. I'm sure that you also would agree with that opinion of mine. And as I always tell you, you can catch up with all our earlier episodes on the handles of Sportstar on the YouTube. And for those who are joining us for the first time, kindly subscribe to the channel and also press all the buttons that you can get hold of. Like, subscribe, and any other thing that is there on the screen. So until I catch up with you next week, stay safe and be good.